Tell me another story with a happy ending. Come, my feet so weary.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Osiris, writer for the Cover City News, Ankh Entertainment Stones and the Color of Our blog, and your weekly show host for 15 minutes. Check it out, dudes. We are at live in the Sunset Plaza on Sunset Strip, what they call Sunset Strip. I am sitting here with a wonderful, beautiful human being, a woman that is an author, lover of children, and lover of all things truth. Her name is Claire Youmans, and she has written this amazing book called The Toki-Girl and The Sparrow-Boy. So hey Claire, say hi to our audience.
Well, good morning, Osiris, and hello everyone.
So let's talk a little bit about Toki. Now, where did you get the idea? This is your fourth book, I know you said.
Yes.
Where did you get the idea of writing a book about, what I liked about the book, Claire, was the fact that it used an analogy of being kind of in the ethereal part of life and the physical reality of life, where the Toki girl was really a bird, but she could transform into a human. Talk a little bit about that.
The initial story comes from a play that was put on in Tokyo several years ago. I was instrumental in that play. It was written and directed by Yukito Kusunoki, director of Journey to Mount Fuji, who is very, very good. But what he did in the play, which I was involved in, was he moved the situation forward in time. He started out in the Meiji era and drew upon Japanese folklore to produce the Toki-Girl and her brother, the Sparrow-Boy. But then the play jumped forward in time and left these wonderful, charming, adorable characters in the Meiji era. And
what is the Meiji era for people that don't understand anything about Japan?
The Meiji era is what happened in the mid-1850s when Commodore Perry sailed into Edo Bay, which is Tokyo, and insisted that Japan open its borders to free trade. At that time, there was a lot of cultural conflict, a lot of change, a lot of turmoil, because the Emperor Meiji, took over the government again and kicked out the shogunate. That era, with all the foreigners coming in and the open ports and the changing culture, was a fabulous era. In 50 years, Japan went from a decaying feudal society to a 20th century power to be reckoned with in 50 years. I don't think there's another nation that could have done it.
That's done that. So how have they been able to adopt into, because there's American folklore and American children's stories, and then there's the way that the Japanese do their children's story. What do you think the major difference is, excuse me, between those two cultures?
I would have to say a lot of it is the cultural basis for the cultures. The cultural basis for most Western folklore is based on the culture of Western Europe, which has a monotheistic worldview with some fairly strict rules that have evolved into some cultural almost stereotypes that are reflected in our fairy tales.
Like what? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, Into the Woods is coming out soon, and that's based on the tale of Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh.
Then we have the whole Cinderella group of the young woman who's practically enslaved. We have a lot of bad step-parents in Western folklore. We don't have as much supernatural influence. Japan is based on a Shinto and Buddhist culture.
Wow.
Shinto is an indigenous religion that can be called a native animism. There's argument over whether it's a religion at all. But Shinto and Buddhism together form a basis for folklore that includes native elements like demons, trolls, animals that can change into humans.
Yes.
That's very popular. Mostly they do it for trickery, but occasionally foxes or cranes will turn into, particularly but not necessarily, women and want to live in a human society. Yukito actually took that fairy tale and jumped it into a creation of his own, which is fairly
and kind of
common.
meshed it with a little bit of folklore of Japan, and then some kind of element of Western society, because I
Western
noticed that
society,
because I
yes.
noticed that you wrote about
Yes.
the Westerners are coming over, and what used to be these wonderful
Yes.
enshrinements and temples are now becoming churches, and that's just not the way of Japan.
Yes.
So what do you think about, in terms of what you're saying right now?
I think the cultures are very, very different. On the surface, there's a lot of similarity. Japanese people don't walk around in kimonos anymore. They only do that for special dress up.
Occasions.
They have a tendency, though, to keep to very traditional Japanese values, which do include Confucian values that were brought over from China. Filial piety is a big one. Viewing oneself, this is huge. This is a huge difference. Viewing oneself as a point in a continuum. I am a person, but I have ancestors.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have descendants. I am a part of a stream. And some of that is takes the Buddhist notion of reincarnation into account, which really in Western culture what we see is a single lifetime with an afterlife reward.
But no thread of continuity between those lifetimes, no thread of continuity
Right.
between past, present, and future.
Right. There isn't that continuity, and that's a big, big difference. One of the things we have here that I think is absolutely adorable is tokis aren't pretty. A toki has a big, long hook nose. And
It's like a bird or something.
It's a bird.
right?
It's the
Yeah.
Japanese crested ibis. It is an endangered species. They have and still do have a big nesting ground on Sado, and there is a crested ibis project to reintroduce the birds back into the wild in Japan.
Right.
Their feathers are absolutely gorgeous,
Right.
and it is possible to use those feathers in weaving and the production of goods.
Right.
It is, and that's really why they were hunted. They wanted those feathers, and that's really reflected in.
And so they
Azuki's
really
experience.
did use, that is kind of like an analogy of a true kind of behavior in that culture, that they sell feathers. Because I noticed that
use
the
feathers.
Toki-Girl was, the whole story was built around her vacillating between being a girl and a bird, and having the feathers as a bird, and those feathers being able to be sold.
Yes.
So they actually sell feathers like that in that kind of area in
If you
Japan.
remember your history, because you weren't there, but the history of the, say, 1880s to 1910, you'll remember that in America and in Europe, people wore hats. Women wore hats.
That's right, with gloves
and
and the
were
whole thing.
huge hats. They were works of art, and they were full of feathers. And that's one of the things these feathers were used for.
Oh wow, to make hats.
And they were also used in Japan for the same thing, but a lot of that was ceremonial.
May I ask you this? The other thing that I found interesting about your particular book is that their parents passed away very early.
Yes.
Whereas in American culture, it is that whole unit. You got the mom, you got the dad, you got the kids, and
Yes.
you're considered unfortunate if your parents pass away early. So and those kids seemed very able to survive without their parents by just kind of having basic common sense about who they were,
And
So-
also turning into birds.
and
helped.
turn into birds. Yeah. So what do you think about the family differences of Japan, and how the family was structured in Toki-Girl and Sparrow-Boy?
Some of it is the continuity. Even though they lost their parents, they believed and felt that their parents were still there in the universe, not just where they were.
Yeah, like they're gone and we're
not-
never going to see them again, and it's over. That kind of thing.
Exactly.
That permanency.
Also, and they really, I mean, they're kids. What do they know? At this point, they are very, very concerned with simply being able to be themselves, to live as children, to live as birds, to live as who they are. That is their chief concern. But in Japan, especially at that time, there is a huge emphasis on the extended family. Extended families frequently lived together. People took care of each other in a way that we do sometimes see in Western culture. But the notion of the extended family that goes backwards and forwards in time, that your ancestors are watching over you, that they might be able to help you, that they might care, is a little bit different, because they view their parents not as irretrievably gone, but as having moved.
Right.
It's a little easier for them to come to the notion of being orphans. They haven't really thought it through as to what's going to happen next. Of course, it does happen. I'm working on book 2.
Yeah.
Things do happen.
So you're working on a book 2 as
yes,
as
I am right now.
Second part of the Toki-Girl.
It takes them forward.
So they end up where they finally find each other at the end. Shota and Azuki are their names of the 2 major characters. Would you, I absolutely love the color and the life that you brought to the characters, the Igrets and the Onos.
Oh, I love those
Kangos and all the different colors, and the dragon princess that was under the sea, and she had green. She was with her father, and they ruled under the sea, and Azuki met her in her journey, and she was like, I'm always here for you, and if ever you want to come back, you just call me and I'll be there. Wherever it's such a wonderful land of tales and color and life to go through. Where did you get the concepts and the ideas about those characters?
I did a lot of research.
Yes.
And I
on Japanese culture in general?
Yes.
Or
well,
just
specifically folklore and specifically history.
Yeah.
The Dragon Princess is actually a Buddhist character. She comes out of the Lotus Sutra, where she shows that female people and animal people are also eligible to attain enlightenment through the Lotus Sutra in their current lifetimes. But it seemed absolutely wonderful to have a girl who was a dragon meet a girl who is a bird. And to have that great commonality.
And they get along. They weren't fighting and talking about, oh yeah, I don't like you because you look better.
Well, and that's part of it. They are able to accept each other. Although I have to admit, a dragon's pretty scary. And if you think she's scary, you ought to see her dad. Oh, he's going to appear. Yes.
In the second volume.
He is.
I'm looking
And
forward
you know
to reading
what?
it. What?
He may have to call her mother.
Oh, we're gonna have a real twist of
things
here,
scary
people.
Prospect indeed. Interesting enough about the Dragon Princess, her mother is a European dragon.
Yeah, I noticed that she said that.
And
how
that
did she
is
end up under the
different.
ocean with the dad and not the mom?
Well, her dad has custody.
Oh, is that what happened? I'm like, what is
Essentially. Her parents no longer live together. I'm not sure they ever did. I haven't really thought that.
And is that a non-traditional part of Japan? Is that the parents, no matter what, you stay married? Or is that changing?
An interesting point. It was very popular. It was very, very easy, especially before the Edo period, which started in the mid-1600s with the ascendancy of the Tokugawa shogunate. Generally speaking, children were mostly the property of their fathers. A woman could get divorced simply by leaving. A man could get divorced simply by saying, leave. He would return the woman's property, although in that period of time, the earlier period, women owned their own property.
Okay.
So the woman would simply pack up her stuff and leave. The father retained rights to the children and was almost always considered the custodial parent. Although he frequently would not take that role.
Now, in regards to her, I know that when she first escaped her mom and dad, I know that they were bought into the new regime. The guy had gone to America. He'd come back, okay, everybody's being Americanized. We're not going to do things this way. Their interaction with their children, the female, how they rever or how they deal with the women in that culture. I noticed that in her situation, she was caged where the guy just wanted her for her beauty and her feathers. The new guy, the new regime. He wanted her for her beauties and her feather. And I noticed that as a woman, she felt like I don't know what to do. I'm not strong enough to do this, but I'm not
Yes.
but I'm not weak either. What do I do until she finally escaped? Where did you get that particular analogy for how they deal with women in their culture?
Well, during the Tokugawa period, the Edo period, women's rights were vastly curtailed. Women no longer owned property. The Tokugawa regime was very militaristic and put everything in order and everyone in his or her place. Women lost a lot of rights compared to the rights they had in earlier periods.
Right.
They were no longer allowed to say, hey, I divorce you. I'm picking up my stuff and leaving. This didn't happen anymore.
Right.
The husband had to consent to a divorce. There were a lot of restrictions on women's property ownership as well. The problem with that is that women tried to use their power by leading from behind, as it were,
And that's
by
interesting.
influencing their men. And that's a custom that still persists in Japan to this day.
Really?
Yes, very
So
much
they're not
so.
as avert, because I know I recently spoke to someone that went to a dating service. And one thing is that a lot of the men now are looking and dating Asian women. And I wanted to, ask her, well, why? And it's because I was told by this person that's a dating expert that the women there are quiet. They don't have the mouths and the independence that American women have. And I've met women from Japan and those countries, and they don't seem quiet to me.
They do and they don't. My experience is Japanese society is largely a parallel society.
Okay, and what do you mean by that?
If you are a man, you will operate in one sphere. And in that sphere, you will be godlike. Women will serve you. Women won't talk. They'll serve you. They'll leave the room. But there's a whole huge element of now, dear, you're way too important to pay attention to politics, savings, family economy, where
All the
we live, the family business. You just have another beer and watch that nice sumo tournament. There is a lot of leading from behind. But men don't see it because it's handled very subtly. A man thinks that an Asian woman is going to wait on him hand and foot. And she will do that to some extent, but she's also going to be running things. Absolutely running things. In many different ways. In the household, in the family business. One of the things I wanted to show is how ordinary people lived. Ordinary people are not very well represented in the histories of that period of time.
Yeah, they're mostly like people in the positions of authority or political positions.
Exactly. And those women had far less freedom because they had to live under a great many rules.
Keep talking.
Okay. As those women had to exercise what power they did have and live a very circumspect life, the peasant woman, the craftswoman, the merchant woman, that woman is going to be a partner in the family business, and she will probably handle all the money, keep all the books, and will work side by side. But at the same time, she will call it her husband's business. But it will actually be the business of the family, and the woman will take that into account. I recently saw a family business that is actually being run by the mother, but the son will say, my mother runs this business, my mother's the president, she knows what she's doing. The mother will say, oh, no, this was my husband's business, now it's my son. But that's not really so. It's a family business. It's just the way they characterize it.
Okay, so we are right at the end of our show.
Yes.
What I need you to do is give us your name again, your website, anywhere we can find anything. I want you to hold your book up so we can get a copy of that beautiful cover. And you can hold it up a little higher.
A little higher? Do
Yes,
you get it?
yes, that's
This
fine.
was done by the very distinguished comic book artist Frankie Chan. And I think he captured the characters just beautifully.
Wow.
The ebook version of the Toki-Girl and The Sparrow-Boy is now on sale at Kindle through the holiday season because I really want children to read. I really want them to read.
Okay.
It's so important that children read. You can do a lot more with a book as a medium of expression than you
Right.
can with any other medium I know about.
Okay.
As we persist in this, kids are getting tablets. I love the internet. I just love the internet.
I think it's made things convenient. I think it gives people an equal level of playing field.
And research.
Yes.
I was in the Bodleian at Oxford. I was at UCLA. I was at Harvard. I was at Cambridge, all in one day through my computer. I love it. But I also think it's a great way. Kids are using tablets, kids are using e-readers. Load that e-reader, load that tablet with something that's really good and fun to read, and now it's practically free. You can reach us at Toki-Girl Sparrow
There you
on
go.
Twitter,
Twitter.
at the Toki-Girl and The Sparrow-Boy on Facebook, and www.tokigirlandsparrowboy.com.
Okay, and what is your website?
www.tokigirlandsparrowboy.com.
Okay, so audience, that's her website. It's been a wonderful, amazing pleasure talking to Miss Author of Toki-Girl and Sparrow-Boy, Miss Claire Youmans. And we can look forward to seeing a second volume of the Toki-Girl Sparrow-Boy
Yes.
story. And for those of you who haven't read the book, I read it. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. Anybody, any age can relate to it. And this has been Osiris again, Cover City News, on Entertainment Stones, and the Color Red blog, and your weekly host for 15 minutes. And that's a wrap.
Tell me another story with a happy ending. Come, my feet so weary.